The single most important skill in life is the ability to communicate and influence people. I went from making $25,000 a year to building 3 companies worth over $100 million each. And it wasn't because I was smarter than anybody else. It's because I learned how to control conversations and get people to say yes. Here are the 4 strategies I used personally for every deal that you can copy immediately. Strategy number 1 is the AMA blueprint. If you want people to say yes more often, stop pitching and start asking the right questions. When I was 26 years old and I was trying to raise my first $1 million, I sat through over 50 presentations where my chairman was going through a pitch deck, one page after another. I was watching people disconnect from the conversation. He wasn't asking any questions. When I finally said, hey, I'm going to try this, and I took over the presentation, before I opened the pitch deck, I used the AMA method. If we go through this deck, and when we get to the end of the deck, you saw everything you would want to see in order to choose to make an investment in a business, what would be the top 3 to 5 things that you would have to see to grab your attention to say this is a great investment opportunity or this is an investment opportunity I'm not interested in? I would kick off the conversation with that question. Then the person would get a chance to communicate, and I would take notes what they would say. And I would do that at the very beginning of me presenting the business opportunity. Then they would talk for about 10 minutes, because here's the art. If you're talking, you're pushing. If you're asking and they're talking, you're pulling. So once they made their statements about what was important to them, I would then go into AMA. Acknowledge it. You have to do that in 20 seconds. So you don't overtalk. Motivate. If I was able to go through this business plan and show you exactly where those 5 elements are that are the most important to you, now ask, would you be interested in bypassing the whole conversation and just talking about those 5 things right now? Now, what I did there is I acknowledged what they said, I created a motivator, and I asked a question. And what I did also is give them permission to talk. So they would start talking again. And then I would listen to them, and then I'd ask another question. The whole point in acknowledge, motivate, and ask is to set up a structure of conversation where you do less talking, you do more asking, and they give you more information so that then you can frame the information you're going to give back to them in a way that's motivating and inspiring to them to say yes. It should feel like a natural, fluid conversation that concludes in making it easy for someone to say yes. So the next time you're in a sales or negotiation conversation, stop leading with a pitch and start asking what result they would want to achieve if they choose to move forward with you, and then acknowledge that answer, create a motivating statement showing how you can accelerate that result, and then ask the question, the key information they need to make a decision to move forward. Remember, keep each part under 20 seconds, but get all 3 done in no more than 1 minute. And by doing that, you'll get more yeses than you'll get no's. Next up is strategy number 2, and it is the secret of the no. This is my number 1 secret to closing any deal. When I was preparing to sell my business for $151 million, I knew that I had to have such a strong value proposition that people wouldn't just throw me out of the room. The way I did that was by starting the conversation with, if you bought me and if you worked with me, I could add $2 billion worth of value to your company within the next 3 to 4 years, knowing what the response to that would already be. And instead of throwing me out of the office, they would ask me one simple question, how? And that then started the conversation. So being able to predict the number 1 objection, which is how could you add $2 billion worth of value to our business so fast when you know nothing about it? So when that objection did come up, and trust me, it came up in every single conversation, I didn't argue with it. I acknowledged it. Hey, that's a great question. In fact, I'm not offended at all because it's the same question everyone's been asking us. That creates an insinuation I'm talking to a lot of people. The motivator was this. If I could show you exactly how we could add $2 billion worth of value to your business, would you want to see it? And then I would ask this question. Do you want the short version or do you want the long version? Now, everybody said at the beginning, we want the short version. But see, it's their idea. But what nobody said to me was we don't want to see that at all, and you're a dumbass for wanting to get such a high valuation, so get out of our meeting. I didn't get one of those. What that means is I wasn't defending my position. The art in this communication cycle is not setting yourself up to where you feel you have to defend your position and other people can attack it. You're actually resolving the data gap. In this scenario, I was actually allowing them to resolve the data gap from information they didn't have to information they would need in order to justify the valuation that I put on the table. So instead of telling me, no, that's a crazy valuation, I knew by default, people would say, how can you possibly add value to our business? And I knew automatically the second position would be, show us how you think you can do that. I did 8 presentations and I got 8 bidders. Every single one of the people I presented to came at me immediately with the same objection, the same follow-up objection, and then the same conclusion. Because once I got them looking at all the details and all the information using the AMA blueprint, I turned all the objections into an opportunity to have a conversation. Now, here's a reality. No isn't actually ever a rejection. It's actually KNOW. It's a request for more information to validate your position. For example, when somebody says, that's too expensive, they're valuing cost to benefit ratio. What they haven't seen, though, is the value proposition. So they're really saying, I don't know why this is worth the price you're asking. When they say, I need to think about it, they're really saying, I have not concluded yet that I have enough information to make the right decision. You stop taking it personally and reacting to it, and you actually start treating it as a gap of data, information they need to conclude making a good decision. The most beautiful words you can have in a sales process or in a negotiation or in a conversation is when someone says to you, now I understand. That makes sense. Let's move forward. When the objection comes up during a conversation, you'll need to disarm it by allowing people to get the information they need to say yes and move forward. Strategy number 3 is leveraging silence. If you want to persuade people, you need to learn when to shut up. Most people blow deals because they overtalk, they overstate, they ramble, and then they create confusion. I used to do this when I was younger. I'd be so insecure about what I sounded like and what I was saying and what I was doing that I actually tricked myself into not thinking I knew what I was talking about. And I'd just keep talking and talking to try to talk over what I was screwing up. In fact, one of the most compelling techniques that my partner teaches is leveraging silence. For example, after completing an AMA cycle, you would look at the person you're communicating with and you'd say, have you heard enough to make a decision? Here's the key. When you ask this question, you don't keep talking. Grant Cardone will teach you wait 10 seconds in silence to allow the other person to process the question and give you an answer. So that would be an example of acknowledge, motivate, and then ask. The asking question is, based on the information I've provided you, have you heard enough to make a decision? Now, after 10 seconds of silence, which, by the way, might feel like an eternity, but it works. If the answer is no, what would you need to hear to make a decision? This forces them to identify the specific information that they're actually missing, which allows you to return to the AMA cycle and close that gap. When I was selling my business, there were moments in those 8 presentations where I asked that question and then they just sat there. As a group, talk about awkward. Can you imagine 5, 10, 20 people sitting there silent, sitting at a table? Every single time, somebody on the other side or another person said yes, or told me exactly what they needed to hear, what they were missing. When you keep talking after asking a closing question, you're creating new confusion, new information, new opportunities for doubt to creep in. Because when you leverage silence, you force the other person to fill in the void, and they'll either commit or they'll tell you what's stopping them from making a commitment. This is why data over drama is so critical. High emotion equals low intelligence. Now here's the thing. If you get nervous in that moment of silence and you start rambling, and talking, you're going to lower everyone's confidence. You're going to create massive confusion. And then they're going to go, we forgot what we were thinking about. And you're not going to be able to address the objection, which means it never actually went away. But if you stay calm, confident, and you allow the silence to do its work, you actually maintain control of the conversation and you get the result you want. So the next time you're closing a deal or negotiating something or communicating with a spouse on something that's not going right, trust me on this, just try it. Ask the question, have you heard enough to make a decision? Then stop talking. 10 seconds. Give them the respect of letting them answer. If they say no, ask what information they would need to hear to make a decision. If they say yes, just return to the AMA cycle and close the gap. Strategy number 4, how to control the urgency. If you're tired of people saying, I need more time and never getting back to you, here's how to flip the script. Let's just say that you're interviewing for a job you really want, and the employer says, thank you very much. We have a lot of other candidates to interview and we'll get back to you. Most people would just say, okay, thank you, please do. Or let me know when you decide. But here's what I would do. I would acknowledge their position. Great, I fully get that. This position and this company are probably one of the most exciting I've ever seen of all postings I've ever looked at. And I'm certain you have a lot of great candidates who would want this job. Then I would use the motivator to assert my value and my constraints. The thing is, I have a couple of other pretty big decisions I need to make as well, and they're coming up very soon. Now you're going to flip it to the question, the ask. If you were me, knowing how great of an opportunity this is to work with you, and knowing you're looking for somebody to hire soon, how long would you wait to hear if I made the cut or not? Because I do have some very good opportunities in front of me. To be honest with you, with the pressure of taking care of my family, I feel compelled to choose soon. This is much better than you saying, well, I know you have a lot of other options, so you need to let me know as soon as possible. And I also have other options and I need to make the decision soon. So let me know or I'll choose what I got to do. The idea here is to leave the urgency in place, but not put them in a position where it feels like you're trying to leverage or pressure them. By informing them that you have some other opportunities, but expressing your interest in the company that you really want to work for, it's a nice way of adding pressure back to them and getting a commitment back to you on what the timeline is. It shows that you respect them, but you are a serious person and you want to stick to a timeline that's reasonable. When you let somebody else control the timeline or the conversation, you're effectively saying, I will wait around as long as you need me to. But when you flip the script and assert your own constraints, you're communicating that your time has value as well. This works in any negotiation, not just a job interview. Whether you're closing a client, negotiating a partnership, or selling your business, the person who controls the timeline controls the deal. So don't just wait around hoping somebody will make a final decision. Force them to commit to a date, a timeline, or a plan. That's how you actually command a sense of urgency. These are the 4 strategies to closing any deal. If you want to see how I went from making $100,000 in my first job to $1 million in my second, to tens of millions and hundreds of millions in my career, check out my next video.